Welcome to episode number 175 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Erdley. I'm your host, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club. That is my membership group and mastermind for product businesses. Head over to resilientretailclub.com to find out more. And if you use the code 10podcast, that's 10podcast, you'll get £10 off your first month in the Resilient Retail Club. Today, we have a fabulous guest talking about a really, really important topic. I'm so excited for you to hear today's conversation because I think it's really going to open your eyes and make you think a little bit differently about what you can negotiate on in your business. Our guest today has got a really, really long history of working in retailers, and he absolutely knows this subject inside out. Can't wait to share it with you.
Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing: breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch, and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business.
Simon, thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to start us off by introducing yourself and what you do?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Catherine, for inviting me on. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm Simon Duncan. And in terms of my background, I've been in retail for about 35 plus years. I set up my own consultancy about 5 years ago. But pre that, I was director of House of Fraser, where I had the commercial responsibility for negotiating and dealing with all the brands that traded in House Fraser, of which there was, I don't know, about 500 brands,
Wow.
about 900 million turnover or something like that. But I set up my own consultancy, as I say, about 5 years ago. And really what it is all about for me is I work with numerous brands and retailers now on the creation and leading of structured and rigorous and collaborative negotiation strategies, which basically ensure sustainable commercial models for the future and really allows businesses to maximize opportunities. So that's who I am.
That's who you are, and I'm sure. I know we delved into this a little bit before we had our sort of first chat about the podcast. But I'm sure we definitely our paths will have crossed in the year in those years in retail. It's such a small world when you get into it.
Extremely
Um,
supportive.
it's
Extremely.
yeah. But I'm really, really excited about our chat today because I think it's going to be so incredibly useful for lots of people listening. And I think it's amazing to have someone with your background and your deep knowledge of negotiation in a retail specific context, which is, it has its own sort of particular way of negotiating. So let's talk about negotiation in general. Why do you think it's such an important skill for business owners to have?
Well, the first thing I would say is that negotiation is basically the oldest form of trading, and whether or not it's for a product or a service. And it's effectively taking place millions of times around a day around the world between people trying to buy and sell. And I fully appreciate that your listeners, being business owners, will be involved and have, you know, many skills about running their business, from pure buying products, but also financial planning and marketing and procuring. Whether or not that's with the brands they're buying in or wholesale or indeed their landlords, etc. So all of those dealings that they are having are effectively some sort of transaction.
Hmm.
And that is why you absolutely need to ensure that you have good negotiation skills in order to be able to survive and secure value for money, whether or not that's on commercial deals or operational deals. So negotiation, as far as I'm aware, within retail particularly, is absolutely a core skill that you need to have in order to be able to move forward and survive.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So it runs through pretty much everything that people are doing.
Absolutely. I mean, as I say, you know, when in retail, when you think about negotiation, I mean, people immediately sort of start thinking about, well, it's to do with the buyers and the merchandisers actually buying the product. But actually, it's more than that. I mean, it's about with the buyers and the merchandisers. Yes, you're buying a product, but you're also trying to formulate a collaborative partnership. But also, within marketing areas or e-com or finance or even HR, you're usually buying some type of service. And therefore, if you, again, it goes back to this buying and selling. If you're buying and selling, you're negotiating.
Yeah, for sure. So when you when you come in and worked with businesses, retail businesses, and work with them on their negotiation and looking at, as you said, areas that they can negotiate, where are some of the key areas that maybe you find that people generally don't negotiate where they could, or equally where you just think, right, this is the key area that's going to help the bottom line the most?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, over the last five, well, yeah, over the last 5 years, particularly with my own consultancy, I've worked with about 4 or 5 different brands where I go in and do an end-to-end negotiation strategy.
Hmm.
And effectively, to be honest with you, Catherine, it's really across their supply chain.
Mm,
So, yeah, I mean, the areas. So, whenever I go into a business, I'll sit down with teams and I'll assess what the current trading terms are within, yes, absolutely, brands that they're buying in, or maybe wholesale partners they're selling out to. But then it's also their manufacturers of their own products, own label products, but it's also their logistics companies, their distribution, the warehousing companies that they use. It may well also cover categories such as agencies that they use within marketing for point of sale material. And indeed, in procurement companies, retailers are usually buying products not for resale. In other words, I don't know, like the carrier bags that they're giving their
mm,
product in the carrier bag. And then slightly more tricky is negotiations with landlords and,
right.
and, and indeed utility suppliers, whether or not that's electricity, gas, your phone, whatever. So in fact, there are numerous categories within the supply chain, obviously, that you need to be looking at to ensure that you're getting best value. Admittedly, the key ones are going to be around product. So the
Mm.
brands and the wholesale partners and your private label if you're actually manufacturing product.
So do you think it's almost like everything's negotiable?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's that old adage. If you don't ask, get. So, yeah, I mean, there are tougher areas, and I'll probably come on to with regards to what are the key things you really need to think about when you go into negotiation. But it's a lot to do with balance of power, and it's a lot to do with what's the longevity of the relationship that you want. So, when you are buying product, yes, you are actually trying to establish a collaborative long-term relationship. But then that brings about the area for potential for negotiation. Um, when you get into utilities, yeah, fine. That's a bit of a tougher one. And then
Right.
or if you're doing your logistics and you're dealing with somebody like DHL,
Mm.
well, your balance of power is not massive there, but
Yeah.
there is still scope to negotiate. You should be looking at all your profit lines,
Yeah.
um, the, thinking about where is there potential to get leverage in order to be able to negotiate a better deal, effectively.
Right. Brings us on perfectly to the next point then. So if somebody's listening to this, they're thinking, okay, right, yes, that sounds like something I really need to look at. I'm going to start thinking about everywhere that effectively everywhere you spend money as a business,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if they're feeling inspired to start looking at their own key areas for negotiation, what are some of the key steps that people should take before entering into a negotiation situation?
Right. Okay. Well, th- there's a
Yeah.
lot to be considered and thought about before you even start a negotiation.
I was going to say, I should really say that I know that this is something that you cover when you do negotiation training, you cover in a
Yeah.
huge amount of depth. So I appreciate I'm asking you to sort of distill this into the sort
Yeah.
of top
Yeah.
line.
I'll I'll try and keep it tight, but it's just really important to understand that, first of all, the planning stage, in other words,
Mm,
before you even start a negotiation, the planning stage is absolutely critical. And to be honest with you, you should be spending 85% of your time just purely on planning, as
mm,
in 85% time from the very beginning of your planning, right through to actually securing the deal. Because the more you plan, the more confident you're going to be and the more in control. And negotiation is about confidence and it is about control. Um, so the things you need to think about before you even start a negotiation. First of all, it sounds simple, but understand exactly what you are really trying to achieve. What are the current facts of the business relationship? Um, when you're looking at a particular partner, how do their trading terms relate to other partners, or indeed to that type of partner within the marketplace? As I've mentioned briefly, it's the balance of power that you have, not just with the company you're dealing with, but also the individual that you might be having that negotiation. Because you might have a big business with with limited balance of power for yourself, but with the individual, they m- you may be one of their key clients, and therefore
right.
you have power with them.
Got it.
Um, Another big thing is mindset. So, what's important to you? Yes, absolutely, but you also really need to get into the counterpart's mindset. Understand what's important to them. What do they need? What are they actually trying to get out of the negotiation? Because there may well be stuff that you can actually compromise on, show collaboration, and give them. There's low cost value to you, but high value to them. Um, there's also, if you're dealing with lots of brands, perhaps that you're buying in, is sort of have a view of segmenting them into simple categories to really try and get the true focus. So there's a stat, it's a common stat, it's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
I reckon probably the majority of your listeners within their own businesses, if they really truly evaluated where they're actually getting their profit from, profit is usually going to come probably, well, 80% of their profit is likely to be coming from 20% of their partners.
Right.
So those guys that are really important to you, they're what we call nurture partners. And those are the ones where you are going to have to negotiate and compromise and be collaborative on. Most of your listeners will then, if they assess, so you've got 20% that are nurture, they'll have 60% or so that are, which we call exercise. And those are the guys who, yeah, they might be giving you quite big value and scale, but actually you could probably flip the relationship to a completely separate partner and it wouldn't really affect your overall business. And those are the guys that initially you'll defend your negotiation ask. You may well get into a bit of negotiation afterwards. And then I can guarantee, again, in every business, there is a long tail partners that may be actually about 20% of your overall mix, but will be a significant number of partners that are actually giving you diddly squat.
Right.
And really, at the end of the day, they're expendable. So, in other words, you put out what your new terms are going to be, and those are the guys that you're actually going to defend throughout to the point. If they don't agree, you cease business with them.
And when you say defend, so that means you kind of stick to your guns.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the next part of the sort of planning is you've got to, when you go out for an ask, when you
Mm,
go out to say, right, these are the new terms that are going forward. You can't just say that straight on. You need to give it some sort of basis and some sort of justification. So you need to create a story about your business based on facts that shows the justification for the ask. And also, you need to try and put in something in there that says, right, whilst we may be moving to improve terms for ourselves, the opportunity for you in the longer term by dealing with us is growth for you as well. So
Right.
when you put out that first sort of statement, that's what I mean that with your, the small harvest brands, those are the ones you just say, look, those are, there's opportunity for you, but you have to be on these terms. If you're not on these
Right.
terms, we can't go ahead.
Right. So imagine, so let's sort of kind of get a concrete example. So if you're an independent retailer and you're looking at specifically negotiating with the people that are supplying goods to you, so the people you're buying from, so you'd go through and you'd say, right, these are my 80% of my profit is coming from this 20% of brands. And they're the ones it's kind of a little bit more hand holding with, right? You'd say, let's say you've looked at your cash flow and you think, right, okay, I need to push my payment terms. I can't pay upfront anymore, or I've got to extend it. Most small retailers will have much shorter payment terms than big retailers, for example.
Yeah.
But let's say you just say, okay, actually, or next year for Christmas, okay, I really need to spread out the payments for my Christmas stock because it's just too much of a pinch point. So then you're going to look at, right, these people these are my nurture. These are my
Yeah.
80% of my business, my profits coming from these. So I'm going to, it's going to be much more collaborative.
Yeah.
What can we do here? And ultimately, that you don't want to cease trading with them because they're really important to you. And then you've kind of got the rest, then the big chunk that, some will be more important to you than others. But then that there's a whole bunch of people that you're not really getting much profit from them. So you're just going to say, look, I'm going to be spreading out payments of my Christmas stock next year. And if they say, oh, that doesn't work for us, you're like, okay, tough. So
Yeah. Definitely. It's how hard you go into that negotiation. With your
yeah.
lawyers, you're going to be more compromising. Yeah. You want to push out your settlement terms, your payment days to,
Mm,
let's say you're targeting, you want to push them out to 30 days.
yeah.
Well, you might actually start your negotiation by saying, we're actually going to go out to 60 days payments.
Mm,
However, we are prepared to pay you 30 days, but in return for paying 30 days, we want a 2% settlement discount.
yeah.
And then when you come into the negotiation, what you may well end up on is getting the payment terms out of 30 days with no settlement discount. But that's actually what you were targeting in the first place.
Right. Yes.
So that's the next part of sort of the planning process, once you get justification, is actually thinking about where's your start position, which is called the anchor. So if you're going for 30-day payment terms from currently 15, say, you may want to start at 45, 60 days. And then your break point, if you're targeting 30 days, is 30 days. So you go out asking for 60, but your break point's 30. And then it's thinking about the moves you can make in between your anchor and break points. Because if you ask for 60 days, the likely response you're going to get is no chance.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, perhaps we will move to 45 days, but for 45 days, I'm going to have to get a 1% settlement discount from you.
Right.
No, that's still too long. All right, well, perhaps we can compromise on 30 days, but in return for 2% settlement discount. That's a and those moves in between your anchor and your break point are called variables. And we're just talking purely right at this moment, Catherine, about, payment days and settlement discount. But
Yeah.
there's other things you can bring in there, like, I don't know, marketing contribution, or potentially giving them better locations within your store or on your website. Or maybe it's amazing how often people just want regular communication. So
Well,
if you commit to saying, right, we'll have a quarterly meeting, maybe on Zoom or whatever, but we'll commit to that. Lots of people will actually take that on board and think that is a really credible, positive, and therefore, maybe I am prepared to accept extension of payment terms.
yeah.
So, and you should be able to come up with quite a few of those. But
Yeah. So sometimes it will be payment terms and sometimes it will be So, for example, another common example that I run into with my clients would be, for example, somebody who's manufacturing products and they are, then it's all about dealing with the manufacturers and suppliers. And I often say to people, have you ever asked for a price improvement? If you've been with somebody for, a couple of years now, and you've proven to them that you're a really good
Yeah,
customer and you're buying from them regularly, I think, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going back and saying, well, look, you know me now, I'm good for these orders. Okay, let's talk about pricing because yeah,
Catherine,
that's some
it comes back to what I said before. It's like, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I
yeah.
think a lot of independents, and indeed some of the smaller brands that I've dealt with, which I won't
Mm,
name,
mm,
but brands who are doing like 30 odd million turnover
mm,
have felt as though that they're in a weak position. So they never ask. And the
mm,
manufacturer says, well, we've got to increase the cost by 8% this season. And I've had brands and I've said, well, what do you do when they say that? And they go, well, we have to accept it. I said, why?
mm,
Why do you have to accept it? It may be that you do accept an increase of sorts, but you need to get something back in return, i.e.
mm,
better payment terms. I mean, just
mhm,
really quickly, two examples, because two brands that everybody will know probably. I used to deal with Mulberry. Now, the
mhm,
absolutely key thing for Mulberry, whenever we opened a new store, was they wanted the prime location. So what did I never offer them in the first instance? I never offered them the prime location because I knew that's what they wanted. So my compromise was then, right, okay, fair enough. You're Mulberry, you're wonderful. We love you, etc., etc. We'll give you the prime location, but I want a better margin on the product in return.
right.
And there was another brand called Vilroy and Bock. It was a premium tabletop brand, and it was run by a very old school gentleman, a charming, charming guy, but he was all about relationship.
Mhm,
Well, I then brought in this staggered tiering of relations, which said you're either a premium, gold, silver, or a bronze supplier. And I deliberately made them silver because I knew that would get his goat. And he said, but we need to be premium. So we ended up saying, okay, we'll put you on a trial premium stage for 2 seasons, but only on condition that you give us the marketing contribution and I don't know, payment terms, etc. To
yeah.
which they go, great, I'm now a premium supplier. Therefore, that's what I want. And I'm happy to give the marketing or whatever. And this goes back to what I said about low cost gives for high value
Mhm,
gain. It costs me nothing to make them
mhm,
a platinum. I just had to commit to a couple more regular meetings.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so what you have to think about pre-negotiation is all these things I've said. It is absolutely essential to negotiate, to plan in advance. And it's like, again, another really old saying, which is so true, but fail to plan, you are planning to fail.
Mm,
Simple as that. And if you, as a going back to my start point about planning, a lot of a negotiation, everybody's anxious when they go into a negotiation, even if you're the best bloody negotiator out there. That's not a bad thing because it creates a bit of adrenaline. But if you plan, then you will feel more confident, or you will be able to display more confidence
yeah.
and control. And that's what a hell of a lot of negotiations about. So it's the planning, but then also, obviously, it's about all the bloody, excuse my language, the psychological things that you need to take into account when you actually come face to face with a negotiation, which is
Well, that's so
another.
yeah, because if you've got all your points worked out, then you've got that confidence to know, right, well, if they say it's like a chess game, isn't it?
And I've used that example. I don't know if your listeners probably watched the Queen's Gambit.
Right.
Was an amazing. If you look at it, but you look at it from a negotiation point, she was an excellent player, but she did so much detailed preparation on who her opponent was going to be, how they
Mhm,
play, um, do they hesitate, which pieces do they move first of all, and then she created her anchor position, which was a really strong opening move,
mhm,
but she was constantly thinking, what's their next move? How do I react to that? and thinking sort of 5, 6 moves in advance. And this is where you get your anchor to your break point. You've already planned your moves because you know they're not going to accept the first thing you say. And it's how you then get to that end point, which is success. But yeah, it is like, it is like a game of chess.
How do you figure out what people want? That was the one thing that jumped into my mind. Because I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, sometimes, I guess with Mulberry, it was experience, right? You knew every time you had a new store, they would say, "Oh, but we want the prime spot." So you're
Yeah.
like, okay, that's what they want. So is it part of it just you have to start trying? Because I'm thinking, like, let's say you've got a manufacturer in Turkey that you do a lot of your, knitwear or sweatshirts with, and you think, right, okay, I really want to try and push my price or yeah, like not accept a pricing increase. Let's face it, that's half the negotiation at the moment. So how do you just kind of
Yeah.
make a guess at what you think they might want, or
This
can you ask?
this goes back to this point about trying to get into the mindset,
Mm,
trying to figure out. 'Cause I mean, I guess with the majority of your partners that you're dealing with, you'll have some experience of them in the past, and you should be able to get a good feel for what is important for them. And if
mhm,
it's a new supplier, I'm sure that you'll have contacts, or you can do, loads of research on them in terms of what type of businesses do they deal with, how do they deal with them, etc. With us manufacturer in Turkey, for example, a lot of the Turkish manufacturers love regular communication. So
mm,
committing to talking to them on a business review on a quarterly basis might actually get them over the line. If they're forcing cost price increases on you, a lot of them will accept retrospective discounts. So in other words, based on volume, or
mhm,
some of them actually just want commitment. So you can say, right, I will commit for a 6 months, 12 months period from you, but that is only on condition that there aren't any cost price increases within that period of time.
mhm,
It gives them, it's again about saying, look, guys, there's an opportunity for you because I will buy more from you, but on condition that
mhm.
you're not going to screw me on price.
Right.
And
Yeah.
when you come to thinking about mindsets and all the different things that you can bring into the negotiation between your anchor and your break point, quite seriously, if you sat down, or I sat down with a team of guys from a brand, I'd probably be able to come up with them with about 15 to 20 different variables that you could bring into the negotiation. Some of them won't be worthwhile with certain partners. Some will be more worthwhile. But it's about thinking about the mindsets of your counterpart.
What's important to them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's
Oh,
not,
well,
negotiation's not all about yourself. It's
right.
very much about trying to figure out what's important for the others.
And I suppose the more you do it with a particular partner as well, then the more you kind of understand.
I must admit, you can only push it so far. I mean, like the Mulberry thing, I did that. I actually successfully did that for three new stores over about 18 months time. And then the MD realized what the hell I was doing. Yeah, I had to move to a different sort of, um, yeah, it worked for 18 months.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about asking, right? And this is the thing. I think you absolutely nailed it when you said earlier that a lot of people think that they're in a weak position, so they don't even ask. But if you don't
Yeah,
ask, you don't get. So you might as well try
yeah, and it's
and
also how you ask.
mm,
Can be, because again, another thing with the negotiation, as I said at the beginning, you've got to create a bit of a justification for why you're asking it,
mm,
rather than just go, I'm demanding.
mm,
If you've got a justification, you can ask pretty forcefully, but in a very polite, collaborative, and indeed, another part of negotiation is empathy
mhm,
in that you should, this about the psychological skills you need. It's demonstrating that you're actively listening to their point of view, and you are
mhm,
trying to take into account what they need as well. And that's
mhm,
where the psychological side is needed. It's where your variables are, the timing of where you bring those different compromises into the negotiation. It's pace, it's how you articulate. You know, so it's, but going back, you know, the core thing is about planning, and then it's putting into place with the psychological skills.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think it's so
Oh,
useful for everyone listening to understand that you can ask but do your planning, do your research, understand what you're asking for, right?
yeah,
Work out what you're willing to, where you're going to start and where you want to get to.
correct.
And and actually, I suppose it can strengthen relationships, right? If you do it
Um,
correctly.
it absolutely can. And in fact, you know, lots of people think the definition or think about negotiation is that it's all about winning for yourself. It's all about getting the better, you know, upper hand or rest of it. It is absolutely not. It is about collaboration. And in fact, if you negotiate professionally, collaboratively, with empathy with your partners, you will actually find that your relationships will strengthen and the
Mhm.
opportunity for both parties will grow over time. And
Yeah.
you know, when I've gone out to do negotiations across sort of 1,500 points of contact in one fell swoop, I may well have 300, 400 harvest brands that I talked about. Invariably, I think I've only 11 lost, or like one or two
Wow.
out of 1,500.
Mm,
Because and lots of going back to this segmentation,
mm.
majority of your harvest and probably 50% of your exercise will actually capitulate, and they'll end up agreeing to what your requests are because
Mhm.
they realize they haven't got the balance about.
Mm, mhm. Yeah. So interesting. Thank you so much. There's so much food for thought. And where can people find out more about you and what you do? They want to know more about negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, look, I am more than happy to talk to any of your listeners further about negotiation. I love it. I'm passionate about it. I do workshops. The easiest way to get in contact with me is either just drop me an email, which is duncan.simon@mail.com, or just connect with me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And we'll put all those links, that information in the show notes as well so people can connect.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And I'd love to know, are you going to be trying to negotiate on with some of your key suppliers in your business? I'd love to know what you took away from the episode. Why not hop over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club and say hello? And as well, you can also drop me an email, Catherine@resilientretailclub.com, if you want to share your thoughts or if you've got any more questions about negotiation. And of course, if you have a moment to rate and review the podcast, it makes a huge difference. You can rate and review it inside Apple Podcasts. You can also rate it inside the Spotify app. And if you have a moment as well while you're there, to follow or subscribe to the podcast, you'll be the first to know about every new episode that comes out on Thursday. I will see you next week. Thanks so much for joining me.